was a lovely fall morning as we passed through the modest communities and rustic networks spotting Nova Scotia. We weren't local people to the area, yet we had known about some extraordinary setting up camp regions in the tremendous woodlands around the territory. And it was whenever our companion first got together for an excursion in very nearly 10 years, so we needed to make it a decent one. We had driven from the city to go on a setting up camp excursion, 7 of us in 2 vehicles. As we passed through the provincial open country, Dylan, the oldest of the gathering, shouted out, "It's nothing similar to Toronto, is it, folks?" We as a whole concurred. It was nothing similar to Ontario besides. The Nova Scotia wide open was stunning, brimming with character and culture. As Matt Mays's tall trees blasted over the radio, we were becoming progressively energized for the following couple of evenings we'd spend in the forest. Richie was sitting toward the rear of my team taxi Silverado, tasting on a Molson Canadian and chiming into the radio. I hadn't seen him in such a positive state of mind in years. He was by all accounts at last moving past his separation and having a ball for once. Richie and I were cherished, lifelong companions, and after his significant other left him, we were flatmates in the city. We were like siblings. I'd seen the man endure so severely, and it was great to see him grin. Dylan's sweetheart, Erica, was forthcoming with me, laying down with the seat somewhat back, and Dylan sat in the back drinking brews with Richie. Dylan was a talented climber and outdoorsman such as myself, yet Erica was not really. This was just her 2nd or 3rd time in the profound woods, yet she truly adored it. Perhaps on the off chance that you didn't begin drinking brews before we even hit the thruway, you would have no need to piss like clockwork. Dylan laughed. Okay, to hell with it. Give the others a yell and let them know we're pulling over at the following country road, I said. At any rate, I expected to extend my legs. It was a lengthy drive and my back was beginning to hurt. We called the remainder of the gathering and pulled over. As we maneuvered off onto a country road and climbed out of the truck, the others came in not far behind in their Jeep Wrangler. The entryways opened up, and out came Marianne, Elizabeth, Robert. Marianne and Elizabeth were closest companions. Indeed, even after such a long time of knowing them, I was unable to accept how lovely they were. They seemed to be 2 supermodels. Robert was from BC, and we'd just met 2 or 3 years back. Yet he fit in with us so quickly it was like he was consistently there. "How's everybody doing?" Robert said, with a huge smile across his face. He you'd call a hippie, and consistently brought a boatload of hallucinogenics on our setting up camp outings. He illuminated an enormous joint and started passing it around. I made some noise. "We're great, man. Erica's actually resting in the truck. How are you folks?" "Extraordinary," he shouted. "Extraordinary, man." I could tell from the expression all over, he'd proactively gotten into the sheet of blotting surface corrosive in his knapsack. As the others visited, I went with Richie to actually take a look at the landfill of the fold to ensure we had every one of our provisions. 2 monster coolers brimming with food and beverages, fire-beginning stuff, tomahawks, blades, emergency treatment packs, instruments, bear shower. It was for the most part present. We looked around to ensure nobody could see us from the street, and Richie and I took out the 2 firearms we'd taken with us. A SKS rifle with around 60 rounds of ammo, and a 12-measure siphon activity Mossberg with around 25 rounds of buckshot. The last time we'd been exploring nature, we had a nearby experience with a bear and nothing to safeguard ourselves with. So this time, we ensured we did. You can never be too protected in the woods around here. We really look at the guides. We were drawing near. Just 1 more hour or so and we'd be crashing into the forest. Then at that point, it was a day's climb and we'd be at our picked camping area, a fair estimated clearing in the forest close to a freshwater lake. We'd intended to remain for 2 or 3 days and climb back out. We had a lot of provisions. The remainder of the excursion went by beautifully quick, and in what would seem like no time, we were stacking up our hardware and strolling. We'd gone through the vast majority of the day climbing through the forest, halting for smoke breaks and once to eat. I checked the GPS and we were getting closer to our last objective. A portion of the gathering saw things in the forest en route. They seemed to be little local symbols, dolls, carvings, miscellaneous items swinging from the trees. This probably was a local hunting ground or something, we figured. We left the emblems and decorations where we tracked them down. As we happened upon the clearing, the sun was simply starting to set. We set up our camp and were planning for our most memorable night there. We'd turned on some music on the battery-fueled sound system that Dylan brought, concocted a grill over an open fire, and began to get into the laggers, as a matter of fact. Robert took out the sheet of blotting surface corrosive, and we as a whole endured a shot. We spent the remainder of the night and late evening lounging around the fire, paying attention to music, drinking and smoking, and snickering like lunatics at the stunts the LSD played on our minds. Much to our dismay, the commotion we were all making pulled in something. Something not a solitary one of us had at any point seen. I withdrew to my tent with Richie, Elizabeth, and Marianne, while the others went to Dylan's tent. Marianne and Elizabeth took a gander at me, and Richie and Marianne said, "I assume I know a method for assisting you with moving past that ex of yours, Rich," with a tremendous smile put across her face. Elizabeth approached me and inclined close. We began kissing. Richie and Marianne done likewise. Similarly, as things were beginning to warm up in the tent, we heard a shout from the other one. It seemed like Erica. The other tent was fixed up nearer to the forest while we fixed up down close to the lake, around 100 meters separated. Richie and I hopped up, and both of our eyes fixated on the guns in the corner. We had them both. The other tent was supposed to have one. Fuck. We grabbed the guns and told the girls to stay put, and we hastily loaded them while running towards the other tent. We heard Erica scream again, and by the time we got there, everyone was outside. We all had our flashlights on. "What's going on? What's wrong?" I yelled. Erica was in tears near the tent, holding on to Dylan for dear life. She was muttering something about an animal in the woods. We finally managed to get her to calm down enough to tell us what was wrong. She stammered on, I got up to pee, and when I did, it was behind the tree and it touched my shoulder." "What was behind the tree, Erica?" Dylan said firmly but calmly. "I don't fucking know," she yelled. "It was tall and bony, and it had really long claws. It was covered in blood." I pulled Robert aside. "Man, how much fucking acid did you give her?" No man," Robert said nervously. "She didn't want any." "Was she asleep before this?" I asked. "Yeah, I think so," Robert said. "She must have been dreaming or some shit, man. Here, take the shotgun anyway. Calm her down." And then we heard it. Elizabeth and Marianne screamed, but it wasn't the same. It stopped abruptly. We knew right away something was wrong. A sense of terror washed over all of us. The adrenaline kicked in, and Robert and I ran for the tent, but when we did, it was torn to pieces. When we looked inside, so were the girls. I felt something sour crawl up from my stomach and into my mouth as I looked upon the mangled women that were lying before us. Elizabeth was still alive and was begging me to help her. The helpless look on her eyes shot through me as I noticed both of her legs were missing and her insides were hanging out. Marianne was missing an arm and her head and was almost torn clean in two vertically. I turned and looked at Robert, and all I saw was shock in his eyes. I turned around and vomited. Robert couldn't look away. We yelled for the first aid kit, and the rest of the group came running. We sat and held Elizabeth's hand as she begged us not to let her die. Erica, who was a registered nurse, ran up, but once she saw the extent of the wounds, her hand shot over her mouth, and she dropped the first aid kit. After a moment, she collected herself and began giving first aid while looking at the rest of us hopelessly. Within 5 minutes, Elizabeth was gone. Richie began to yell through his tears. What happened to them?" We all began trying to talk over one another in panicked confusion. Dylan hadn't said a word. "Enough," he yelled, and again louder, "Enough!" Everyone went silent. It looks like a bear may have gotten into the tent. It's probably still around. We need to hunker down at the other tent and wait till daylight. It's our only hope. We'd been checking our phones, but we lost service hours ago. We were cut off. We took the rest of our supplies and ran back to the other tent. As we did, we heard a horrible screeching in the woods. It sounded almost human, but way too animalistic, too loud and shrill. "Goodness, man, it's fucking Wendigo," Robert exclaimed. "My granddad educated me concerning them. They eat individuals in the forest, and it's coming to fucking kill us." Richie exclaimed, "It's a fucking bear or something, man. It's not no metropolitan legend. Furthermore, in the event that it comes around us, we will shoot it dead." He grabbed the shotgun out of Robert's hand and strolled over to get a fire going. We'll have the option to see it better, assuming we get loads of light on the forest. In any case, it was watching us, persistently pausing. We could hear it return up to the next tent and drag something out. The bodies, the unfortunate young ladies. The forest became frightfully cold and calm. We stayed there around the chute with our firearms prepared in the forest. I had the SKS rifle in my grasp, completely stacked, and Richie had the shotgun. It was moving around us and we could nearly get looks with our spotlights, however it was excessively quick. Branches snapped as the beast followed around us, snarling and growling. The remainder of the group took out the tomahawks and blades and remained behind us, with each of our backs to the lake. Quietness. The quietness happened for what felt like time everlasting. Then at that point we heard it, Elizabeth's voice. "Assist me with satisfying. Richie, Sam, Robert, someone help me." It didn't seem normal. It seemed like her, however in a way it didn't. "This is incomprehensible. We watched her kick the bucket," Dylan hollered. "How could she be still alive?" He took off for the forest, toward the voice. I was unable to snatch him, and he overlooked our supplications to return. "I'm going to get Elizabeth. She's still alive." Those were his final words. We shone our flashlights on him as he went past the tree line, and that's when we saw it. A large, pale gray creature lunged forward. It had lifeless eyes, long, mottled, black and gray hair, and long, slender claws which it dug into Dylan's flesh. It must have been 8 feet tall at least. Its long, gnarled teeth showed as it screamed in Dylan's face before tearing into his throat. All we could do was watch on in horror. Dylan fell to his knees as the creature began ravaging him, tearing him to pieces. It looked like a large, emaciated humanoid, but it appeared to have incredible strength. Richie and I opened fire as soon as we realized Dylan was dead, and there was no saving him. The bullets tore through its flesh, but it did not react. Instead, it pulled Dylan's mangled corpse into the woods as it took off running, letting out loud screeches as it ran, breaking limbs off of trees like toothpicks. Richie and I both emptied our weapons into the beast, and it didn't even faze it. Erica was crying hysterically. Richie and I reloaded as fast as we could. We heard a horrible crunching sound in the trees, like a dog eating a ham bone. We all looked at each other in shock and horror. It must have been getting close to daylight. The creature didn't seem to like light, as it would periodically throughout the night come and watch us, screech at us in the woods, but never come close to the firelight. It also fled from our flashlights. We all thought that as long as we kept the fire going, we would survive until daylight. If the creature fled from the sun, we would make our escape. That's when it started to rain. We began throwing things onto the fire frantically, trying to keep the light alive, but the fire grew more and more dull as the rain beat down harder. The creature was inching closer as the light died. It evaded our flashlights with incredible speed and came almost within striking range. It was so close I could smell it now, the smell of rotting flesh. We could see its black teeth in its rotting mouth, the veins standing out against its gray skin, the rotting flesh at the end of its claws as it began grabbing at us, trying to pull us away. Richie and I opened fire directly at the monster, and it began to screech in pain and stumble backwards, only to regain its footing and lunge forward again. Just as we both emptied our magazines, Robert yelled, "Get down!" I looked over my shoulder and saw him brandishing a flare gun. Genius. It hates light. If we stick a flare in its flesh, it might just flee. But Robert did even better than that. He fired a bright ball of white phosphorus directly into the monster's screeching mouth. It flailed around horrendously as the flare burned away inside its mouth. It gave Richie and me sufficient opportunity to reload and start terminating on it once more. We were on the remainder of our ammunition now. On the off chance that it didn't kick the bucket, we were screwed. Robert stacked another flare and let it fly into the beast. This one stuck into its chest, and it tumbled down. We amassed it with whatever weapons we had left. Richie and I started shooting until we had nothing left, while the remainder of the gathering hopped on it with blades and tomahawks. It let out its last terrible suppress as Erica drove a huge parting hatchet into its head. We withdrew back to the camp, watching the beast warily, dreading it might bounce back up and charge without warning. We stayed there, not letting out the slightest peep until the sun came up. As the downpour died down and the sun cleared through, we promptly left the camp, with everything abandoned and made for our vehicles. When we got away from the forest, we were totally depleted, and as the shock died down, we started to cry and attempt to get a handle on what had occurred in those woods. We concluded that we should tell everybody a mountain bear had gotten our companions. In any case, no one would accept the genuine story. Furthermore, during the burial services, we promised to at no point ever talk about it in the future. I don't address my lifelong companions a lot nowadays. We, for the most part, headed out in a different direction after the occurrence. The only one I addressed was Richie, yet he ended it about a year after it worked out, with exactly the same shotgun he held his ground with on that frightful evening.